by Robert McCloskey. As I reread our story today, let's listen for some details that we may not have noticed the first time we read it. Mr. and Mrs. Mallard were looking for a place to live, but every time Mr. Mallard saw what looked like a nice place, Mrs. Mallard said it was no good. There were sure to be foxes in the woods or turtles in the water, and she was not going to raise a family where there might be foxes or turtles, so they flew on and on. When they got to Boston, they felt too tired to fly any further. There was a nice pond in the public garden with a little island on it. The very place to spend the night, quacked Mr. Mallard, so down they flapped. Next morning, they fished for their breakfast in the mud at the bottom of the pond, but they didn't find much. Let's look for some extra details. Look at the illustration. What else is happening while the ducks look for food? Just as they were getting ready to start on their way, a strange, enormous bird came by. It was pushing a boat full of people, and there was a man sitting on its back. "Good morning," quacked Mr. Mallard, being polite. The big bird was too proud to answer, but the people in the boat threw peanuts into the water, so the Mallards followed them all around the pond and got another breakfast, better than the first. "I like this place," said Mrs. Mallard as they climbed out on the bank and waddled along. "Why don't we build a nest and raise our ducklings right in this pond? There are no foxes and no turtles, and the people feed us peanuts. What could be better?" "Good," said Mr. Mallard, delighted that at last Mrs. Mallard had found a place that suited her. "But..." Here's another place to see some extra details in the illustrations. Look at the two boys in the illustration. How can you tell which one's going fast and which one's riding slowly? "Look out!" squawked Mrs. Mallard, all of a dither. "You'll get run over." And when she got her breath, she added, "This is no place for babies. With all these horrid things rushing about, we'll have to look for somewhere else." So they flew over Beacon Hill and round the State House, but there was no place there. They looked in Louisburg Square, but there was no water to swim in. Look at the people in this illustration. Why are they so small? The ducks must be flying really high in the air. Then they flew over the Charles River. "This is better," quacked Mr. Mallard. "That island looks like a nice quiet place, and it's only a little way from the public garden." "Yes," said Mrs. Mallard, remembering the peanuts. "That looks like just the right place to hatch ducklings." So they chose a cozy spot among the bushes near the water and settled down to build their nest. And only just in time, for now they were beginning to molt, and their old wing feathers started to drop out, and they would not be able to fly again until the new ones grew in. But of course they could swim, and one day they swam over to the park on the riverbank, and there they met a policeman called Michael. Michael fed them peanuts, and after that the Mallards called on Michael every day. After Mrs. Mallard had laid 8 eggs in the nest, she couldn't go to visit Michael anymore, because she had to sit on the eggs to keep them warm. She moved off the nest only to get a drink of water, or to have her lunch, or to count the eggs and make sure they were all there. One day the ducklings hatched out. First came Jack, then Cack, then Lack, then Mack, and Knack, and Whack, and Pack, and Quack. Mr. and Mrs. Mallard were busting with pride. It was a great responsibility taking care of so many ducklings, and it kept them very busy. One day, Mr. Mallard decided he'd like to take a trip to see what the rest of the river was like, further on. So off he set. "I'll meet you in a week in the public garden," he quacked over his shoulder. "Take good care of the ducklings." "Don't you worry," said Mrs. Mallard. "I know all about bringing up children." And she did. She taught them how to swim and dive, taught them to walk in a line, to come when they were called, and to keep a safe distance from bikes and scooters and other things with wheels. When at last she felt perfectly satisfied with them, she said one morning, "Come along, children, follow me." Before you could wink an eyelash, Jack, Cack, Quack, Mack, Knack, Whack, Pack, and Quack fell into line, just as they had been taught. Mrs. Mallard led the way into the water, and they swam behind her to the opposite bank. Why do you think Mrs. Mallard waited so long to take this adventure? She probably knew it was going to be kind of a long walk and wanted to make sure that her babies would be safe and ready to take that walk. There they waded ashore and waddled along till they came to the highway. Mrs. Mallard stepped out to cross the road. Honk, honk, went the horns and the speeding cars. Quack, went Mrs. Mallard as she tumbled back again. Quack, 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 went Jack, Knack, Black, Mack, Knack, Whack, Pack, and Quack, just as loud as their little quackers could quack. The cars kept speeding by and honking, and Mrs. Mallard and the ducklings kept right on quack, quack, quacking. They made such a noise that Michael came running, waving his arms and blowing his whistle. He planted himself in the center of the road, raised one hand to stop the traffic, and then beckoned with the other, the way policemen do, for Mrs. Mallard to cross over. As soon as Mrs. Mallard and the ducklings were safe on the other side and on their way down Mount Vernon Street, Michael rushed back to his police booth. He called Clancy at headquarters and said, "There's a family of ducks walking down the street." Clancy said, "Family of what?" "Ducks," yelled Michael. "Send a police car, quick!" Meanwhile, Mrs. Mallard had reached the corner bookshop and turned into Charles Street with Jack, Cack, Lack, Mack, Knack, Whack, Pack, and Quack all marching in line behind her. Everyone stared. An old lady from Beacon Hill said, "Isn't it amazing?" And the man who swept the street said, "Well, now, ain't that nice?" And when Mrs. Mallard heard them, she was so proud she tipped her nose in the air and walked along with an extra swing in her waddle. When they came to the corner of Beacon Street, there was a police car with 4 policemen that Clancy had sent from headquarters. The policemen held back the traffic so Mrs. Mallard and the ducklings could march across the street, right on into the public garden. Inside the gate, they all turned round to say thank you to the policeman. The policeman smiled and waved goodbye. When they reached the pond and swam across to the little island, there was Mr. Mallard waiting for them, just as he had promised. The ducklings liked the new island so much that they decided to live there. All day long, they follow the swan boats and eat peanuts. And when night falls, they swim to their little island and go to sleep. Do you think it was worth it to take the ducklings across the whole city? Well, they made it, didn't they? They made it to find their daddy, and now they have a safe home to live right there on that island. Alright, I have 2 good sentences here that describe some things that happened in our book. The first one says, she taught them how to swim. And the next one says, she taught them how to dive. Now, those are 2 sentences, right? 2 really good sentences. The subject's the same in both, right? They're both about both the subject is she, right? So it's about the mom duck, okay? And then they both have a similar predicate. So that means they're almost the same, but they're a little bit different. So this one says she taught them how to swim. So the predicate is taught them how to swim. And this one is taught them how to dive, okay? So we could combine these 2 sentences and combine the predicates and have one long sentence. And sometimes that's nice to do. It just makes your writing seem a little bit easier to read, okay? So down here I have she taught them blank and blank, okay? So if I take how to swim and how to dive, and I put it down here, now I've combined my predicate and I have the sentence she taught them how to swim and how to dive. We could have even said she taught them how to swim and dive if we really wanted to. But those are good sentence right here with the predicates combined. That magic word and really comes in handy when we're writing and we want it to sound just a little bit easier to read, right? All right, let's look at some more sentences. This sentence right here is a good sentence. It says she walked. It has a subject, a predicate, starts with a capital letter, and it ends with a period. So I know it's a really good sentence, right? But if I was writing and I wanted to add a little bit more detail, I could do that pretty easily. So when I come right here, it says she walked to. Okay, so I can add some details like she walked to the park. And now I've got a great sentence. It has a little bit more detail in it, so I know where I'm going with my sentence. And it still has a subject, predicate, period, and capital letter. All right, we could say she walked on the road, right? She walked on the road, and that's some more detail. All right, and we could say she walked with the ducklings, right? She walked with the ducklings. All of those things give us more details rather than just she walked. Today, you're going to add some details to a sentence. You're going to write a sentence, I walked to, and then you're going to fill in some more details, okay? I'll have the beginning part, and then you'll decide what detail you want to add to that sentence, and you'll illustrate it for me.